I was in Vermont with Forall recently, and one evening he gave a talk at Maple about the vision that he and I and we spent the last couple of months formulating, devising, and crafting. And at this talk, it was maybe an hour long in total. He spent a very long time, something like 10 or 20 minutes, telling everyone that he was about to start indoctrinating them, brainwashing them, promulgating a story, fiction, a lie about how things are. He was about to tell a story that would then repeat itself again and again in people's minds, controlling their behavior. And that he was doing this because he had faith that the audience of incredible, magnificent practitioners would be able to handle that in a mature way by not buying in, by overcoming it, by going beyond it, using their practice. Naturally, we find ourselves in this part of the world. Among those who are extremely addicted to stories. And what is possibly the world capital of addiction to stories. Being in such a place, it's only natural that we would ourselves practice the craft of honing, refining, and telling stories. It's reasonable. Everyone around us is asking us to do that all day long. And after all, there is a use in that. This part of the world does, in fact, control the world. It is essential that we have maturity about this. It's essential that we both wholeheartedly engage in this practice of concocting fabrications to spread that do better than other fabrications, that outcompete them in people's hearts and minds. And that at the same time we cultivate, hone, strive for the ability to cut through fabrications, to not buy in to fabrications, not believe the emanations of our minds. It's essential that we train in both of these skills, the skill of wholeheartedly crafting fabrications, telling stories that are compelling, in a compelling way, and simultaneously not buying into those stories, not believing those stories. And as I continue, I may be aware that I am now practicing this skill of indoctrination, deception, by telling a story. A story that we hope is true, or at least less false than other stories, but that simply, due to being a story, is incomplete, is missing the entire universe. As we practice meditation, we should understand why. What is the practice actually doing? How can we expect for more people practicing meditation to lead to, for example, more people or more competent people working on resolving existential risk? Why should we expect that? How would that work? Basically, the practice of meditation is cultivating skills that can be used in investigation. We investigate something. Regardless of what we're investigating, if we're investigating something, it's essential for us to have the ability to concentrate on that thing. Independently of what we are investigating, it's important to be able to attend to the thing that we are investigating. Very often, people think that we are investigating something, and in fact, we aren't even paying attention to that thing. For example, we're paying attention to our ideas about that thing. This is common. We may think that we're investigating the breath, and yet we discover after some time that instead we are attending to a story about the breath. We may think that we are investigating an organization, and instead, after some time, find that we are attending to a story that we have about that organization. We may find that we're investigating any situation For example, a math problem, a computer program, a meal, or anything else, and discover that we have not even been attending to it. Therefore, the skill of concentration, the skill of attending to what we are investigating as it is essential to any investigation. When we are failing to do this, according to Forel, the most common reason that we are failing is that we are unwilling to attend to things as they are. We're attempting to investigate something and we're failing to attend to it. The most common reason for this is that we're unwilling to attend to it. Why are we unwilling to attend to it? Typically because we feel threatened by attending to it. Because attending to it threatens us in some way. In particular, threatens some story we have about ourselves that we found emotional peace with. A story that commonly excuses us from undergoing a certain kind of personal growth. Therefore, in order to perform an investigation, it's essential that we cultivate the skill of equanimity, the skill of attending to things as they are, the skill of being willing to accept whatever reality is telling us. Too often, instead of this, we remain biased in our investigation. We may think that we're using techniques of understanding to clarify evidence, when in fact we are using those techniques to avoid evidence. But to the extent that we are able to experience this as it is, to experience things as they are, to be unattached to stories about ourselves, we can see things as they are. Having accomplished this, the challenge is to see what is happening in a new way that we haven't seen so far. To observe what is obvious, what is right in front of us, but in a new way, so that we're not just seeing our cached ideas about it, but actually seeing it, seeing things in it that we haven't seen before. This is, of course, very hard to do. And yet, it's a skill that can be cultivated. We cultivate this skill through meditation practice. How? By again and again practicing it. Practicing attending to anything, something. Practicing attending to it in a way that is not protecting our stories about ourselves, that isn't rejecting it or trying to make it last forever. And having done that, staying with it and observing it in a new way, watching it unfold, shift, change, so that we see it more and more clearly. This, of course, is a story. The story is that meditation cultivates the skills of concentration, equanimity, and sensory clarity. Naturally, as experienced practitioners, we may be reluctant to tell such a ridiculous and obviously false story. Yet we have to ask. Although due to our own clarity, we see that the story is false, is it less false than the story that people already have? In fact, we do have some clarity. Its clarity is, in fact, a result of the practice that we have done. So it's essential that we are clear in that. Out of compassion, we tell stories such as this. It may help people to perform their own investigation and come to their own conclusions. In my own training, I rapidly stopped believing in all of my stories about meditation after maybe 2 months of my 9-month-long stay in CML in 2013. My initial training period. After about 2 months, I realized that everything everyone had told me about meditation was a lie. It was not pleasurable. I was not getting clearer. I was not more okay with things as they were. I was not more concentrated, at least from my own perspective. It didn't seem that way at the time. And yet this is because an actual investigation was occurring. It's so common for us that as we get to that point in practice, we conclude that it's not working, and we then leave. We get to the point where all of the rapturous, pleasant, exciting explosions of insight that guided us on the path for however long we spent doing that sort of thing, posting on Reddit about our new idea about how meditation works and trying to get everyone to function according to it. We go beyond all of that, and we're left with this knotted emotional tension throughout our entire bodies. We're left with a sense of sheer incompetence, inability to focus on anything for even a moment, to care about anything for even a moment, much less to know what to focus on. We're left facing that we have no idea how to live our lives. The most basic and essential task in the entire world, and we are completely incompetent at it. We face that. This is because an actual investigation is occurring. Finally, we've gone beyond stories. Therefore, we experience this pointless emotional tension that no story matches. People tell us stories about it and we just get mad at them. It isn't that. It isn't about that. And yet this experience is precisely the one that is actually motivating the energy of the entire world. It's because people are unwilling to face this lack of knowing, this tension, pain, discomfort, incompetence. We people are unwilling to face what is happening in our bodies as it is, that we construct these big, impressive identities, produce these big, impressive ideas, have big, impressive paychecks and jobs and salaries and friends, because we're avoiding this experience that we are able to produce enormous suffering in the world. As long as what we're doing is basically about avoiding this experience, naturally we'll remain biased in any investigation we do. We may pretend that we're thinking because we want to think clear thoughts, but in fact, if we're thinking because we want to avoid the direct experience of our bodies, it's very difficult to trust that thinking. Right now, at Maple, there are those who are undergoing this process. There are those who have, due to the depth of training there, due to the integrity of the community, gone beyond the stories that they had about meditation, about practice, about what matters and why, and are now facing this complete lack of understanding, complete lack of solace and comfort. And these heroes, due to the depth of their own commitment and their own desperation, are continuing to work through this, to strive, to let go of what they've been holding on to. It's possible to directly encounter this within minutes of setting foot in a place of training like that. We enter a place like Maple, and within minutes, our bodies feel different. We feel more relaxed. We feel relieved, and we don't even know why. Because this real work is happening there, because there are those who are really doing it, who have the external and internal conditions to undergo this process of transformation. Having left Maple, or CML as it was called at the time, at the end of my first training period, I returned to the world convinced that monasteries were just bad. I returned to the world convinced that I'd just had difficult, unpleasant, uncomfortable experience that had no purpose, and that the best I could do was try to paint it as a positive. We often find that we are inclined to represent things that we've done and spent a lot of time on as good, simply so that we can seem to be good. And I did this. I put my 9-month-long meditation retreat on my resume and said that at that retreat I'd gotten a bunch of clarity and concentration and therefore was a better employee. I lied to my potential employers in that way, saying that because of all of this meditation, I was going to be a better programmer. Even though I knew at the time that this was obviously false. It was obviously ridiculous. I'd obviously not gotten anything out of it. Yet it turns out that I did in fact get a lot out of it. Unexpectedly. It turns out that I was even better at programming after I left that first training period. I was even better at such a imaginary task as programming, writing code for computers. Both because I could concentrate more effectively, in fact, regardless of what I believed about whether I could concentrate or not, I in fact could concentrate better. And because it turns out that in programming, our relationships matter. Our connections to other people matter. And by working through my terror at connecting with other people, to some extent, I was able to connect with people more. I was able to love people more. By working through my own blockages and loving myself more, I was able to love my coworkers even more. I found that despite my beliefs about what had happened, I in fact had benefited from the training. Found moreover that the discomfort that I had attributed to the monastic training was in fact the discomfort that I had just been running from my entire life. That discomfort, that burning insecurity and pain in my heart that had surfaced during my training at CML didn't go away after I left. Didn't go away when I was in a relationship with someone who I loved. Didn't go away when I was at a company that was my dream job. It had actually been there the whole time. By doing this training, I'd simply lost the ability to repress it. So seeing this naturally, after some time, I returned to the training. And continued to strive. In that time, the situation in the world has not, to my knowledge, improved. I re-entered the training in 2016, desperate for some way of preventing humanity from destroying the world. For example, by constructing artificial intelligence. Each day I spent sitting, training, dealing with my issues in relationships with the other residents, with myself. I was very aware that I was not directly working on any of the problems threatening the future of life on Earth. I was not working on understanding how to build an artificial intelligence that wouldn't destroy the entire planet. I was not working on trying to understand how to reverse climate change. I wasn't working on trying to understand how to defuse and prevent nuclear war. Instead, I was sitting there, avoiding my experience. Months passed. I wondered again and again why I didn't just leave and join some other organization, one that was more overtly and explicitly working on these problems in a way that I could understand. I don't have a good answer for why I didn't leave. And gradually, as time went on, it became more and more apparent that the work I was doing was, in fact, the work that needed to be done. Gradually became apparent, at least from my own limited perspective, that this work could impact these problems. That it could have results on timescales that were relevant. As I've been in the Bay at Oak, this has only become more obvious. It has only become more obvious that, in fact, the issue is not that there aren't enough people with enough intelligence to solve these problems. The issue is that there is not enough love, enough of a community, enough caring and compassion. That is not being prevented, blocked, obstructed, due to our habitual fear, our habitual ways of seeing things. It's not that these other approaches aren't important. They are, of course, naturally. You don't get anywhere just by loving yourself. You have to actually do something. Not enough to come to some big realization about how things are. You have to actually live it in your life. Not just part of your life, not just the life that you've labeled as your life, but your whole life. Including whatever it is that you're avoiding. Whether that's your heart, or your mind, or anything else. But that the bottleneck is clear. The place to push on remains clear. Therefore, I continue to practice, to strive, attempt to teach constructions, to see through constructions, in hopes that this may be of some benefit. So, for the benefit of all life on this planet, let's continue.